Alright, chess fans, it's going down in the scrapyard. My challenge going against the chess.com bots continues. I'm in the second of the 1700 bots. This is Jonas. D2, D4, second best by test. I play white against him until I lose. He's going for a fianchetto of his king's bishop there. And here it comes. We continue with the first 5 moves against every opening setup by black. It's looking now like a King's Indian. He's just delayed the development of the G8 knight to F6. These computer bots at the lower rating levels, 15, 16, and 1700, they seem to develop their minor pieces in a somewhat orthodox fashion, often not clearing out their king side and castling right away like you see moi doing. With this opening system, I have my share of the center. I've developed my king side minor pieces. I've brought my rook closer to the center. I have positioned and tucked my king away in the corner for safety. Now I can tend to my queen side development, usually by the moves c4, knight c3, b3, bishop b2, and rook c1. If you've seen my videos before, you've seen that mode of development. I just want to pause for a minute because I have other ways of developing, including delaying moving my c-pawn and developing my bishop immediately to the long dark-squared diagonal. In this case, it would oppose the dark-squared bishop of black on g7. And that would be a consideration. I would have to be careful, though, about opening this diagonal, leading to my rook snoozing as he is on the a1 square. Another option that I play recently, and I'm starting to have success with it, is something I hadn't played much before. That's c2, c3, forming the very famous triangle, and then playing from the white side kind of a orthodox Queen's Gambit declined. Sometimes, to prevent symmetry, I will exchange every pawn that I can, because one of the kryptonites against my particular opening setup is black will get a complete equality, effortless equality by just symmetrical play, although we're not seeing symmetrical play here. We're seeing the early King's Indian break of e7, e5. That's the classical King's Indian style break. The other break, pawn break in the King's Indian, is c5. And of course, there are many other branches on the tree of the King's Indian. But all this is happening before he has completed his business. That's not very advisable for the players of the black pieces. Do not start on adventures before you have dealt with issues such as king safety and development. Those are primary issues. Alright, the obvious threat, quote-unquote, here is for black to play e5 to e4, attacking my f3 knight, forcing it to move away and depriving my king side of one of its key defenders. He may then follow up with d5, d4, and then attempt a classical, again, King's Indian attack against my king side. And one idea for me is to turn it into a kind of a perk and play e3, e4, and if he castles, I can recapture this way. If I were to move c3 now, with the idea of just blunting this entire long dark squared diagonal, then by playing the threat, quote-unquote, of e5 to e4 and then following it up with a d5 to support his advanced pawn on my side of the board, I will have wasted a move with my c-pawn, which in that case would most efficiently be on c4. I think that's what I'm going to play, and that's going to be my anecdote. Okay, he exchanged in the center. Little ill-advisable to be starting fisticuffs in the center of the board. These 4 squares are the most important squares on the 64. square chessboard. Why is it a little inadvisable? Because look, his king is sitting right there in the open E file, which now will open up. I have two choices: capture with the knight, capture with the pawn. It's an area that I have to study more. This choice comes up quite a bit in my opening system, also known sometimes as the Yusupov-Rubinstein system, or misnamed by the computers as a Kali, although the Kali system, the light square bishop for white, is deployed on the d3 square. The advantage of recapturing with the pawn is it opens a developmental diagonal for my bishop, and I will not be doing my usual fianchetto business, which means I won't be opposing this bishop either. So there's that. The other move is to capture with the knight, and I've got to learn when it's better to capture with the knight and when it's better to capture with the pawn. I'm going to capture with the pawn here, though, because I like the space that I'm getting, and I like the open diagonal, and it seems logical. Capturing with the knight, I wouldn't want to do that until I understood precisely what my plan was. A plan in chess is better than no plan. Alright, I can bring the rook immediately to e1, preparing to check the king. Patzer sees check, Patzer makes check. And that way I'll reposition my bishop to the d3 square with the check, with a tempo. By moving his knight to, developing it here to d7 and playing c6, he has cut off his light squared bishop from the game for the time being. All of this, I'm sure, has various refutations. By all of this, I mean all of black's very questionable play. The computer is calling black's opening effort here the modern defense with 1d4. So this apparently is the modern. We will continue developing apace, knights before bishops. Now he's kind of doubling down on living life on the edge. He's living life on the edge, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, that does deprive the knight of a square. Queen comes off a diagonal that sometimes is important. And comes here to protect that, perhaps. Attack the bishop. Not clear what's going on. Maybe wants to try to occupy. None of that really makes a lot of sense. My bishop could come here. That would either force a pawn, bishop, or knight to interpose, most likely, if the queen doesn't try to move away. The pawn would be weakening his king side, and he's already made castling queen side a risky proposition by moving the pawns that would have been in front of his king on the queen side. If I play bishop to g5, this sortie, but believe it or not, is not my style anyway. I'm not a big fan of the bishop on g5 as a rule. He could self-pin. But the knight is very well protected, and I would not be able to get at it with a pawn because my e-pawn is missing. We're going to reserve where I could post here. c6 did have the benefit of preventing me coordinating my bishop and knight in a whirlwind attack on that d6 pawn. Bring the rook into the game now. I can move the knight to d3 or back on f1. Both moves are often seen in my position. Jonas is making essentially random moves in the opening. Now he's deprived the knight of the f6 developmental square, the queen having previously denied the knight of its e7 developmental square, leaving the knight only with development to h6, which is currently not in the cards because that would drop the piece. So the king is going nowhere. Now look at the queen just sitting there like a canary on the perch, giving me bishop to d3 or bishop to f1, unmasking the rook. Queen and king. The queen is pinned against the king. There would have to be some sort of intercession. And there's no pawn that can intercede, so it's going to have to be a piece. And when the piece comes, that's game over for one Jonas, the 1700 rated chess bot from Germany, according to the chess.com fluff. Let's try to make the precise move. Bishop a little more active on d3, but then now the queen is no longer defending my d pawn as a backup to the knight. And there's that. But if I put the bishop on f1, obviously I could become prone to this pin, I suppose. We'll go bishop d3. This is an active square. Before I do, if I go bishop, let's look ahead to winning the piece, right? So then, yeah, I don't, yeah, d3 is an active square. Knight, okay, thank you. Have a nice day. Now what are you going to do? Okay, we'll take that also. Well, okay, slow down. Max Murray, your host of the Max Murray Show, here from my battle bunker basement along the banks of the mighty Mississippi River in the show me state of Missouri. Bishop has taken. Bishop is now eyeing that h7 pawn. No chance of an attack yet for black on that end. Black is down a piece. Bishop could also take this knight. However, the whole thing, the whole E column is a living hell for black. My queen has a diagonal here. I shouldn't forget that. My dark square bishop not yet committed. So what if I committed it now? Okay, boom. That would help him develop his knight. But then I take off the bishop. He recaptures with the pawn. Material up. But if I play bishop here, he can kind of save himself a lot of trouble. Now this move makes a little more sense. If I take the bishop, he's going to recapture with the pawn, and I can centralize my knight, renewing these ideas if he tries to kick it. Could also centralize the bishop, but it would be biting on these two pawns. Let's just go with the very simple chess principle that when you are up material, you trade material. Let's look at some moves now. His light square bishop finally free to come out. This is f5 common square for that light squared bishop against my system, because my bishop's usually sitting on e2. But not possible here because of the relocation plans. This pawn is currently defended only by the queen on a very vulnerable file, so I can attack it thusly, although he would have a check to get himself out of trouble. I could also just put pressure on it with the bishop, believe it or not. By it, I mean, of course, black's pawn on d5 or e5. Most likely he would support the pawn at that point. Now I don't have this pawn break. If I go for the pawn break and he takes the check, then I can put my bishop to interpose on e3, maintaining the momentum since the bishop is guarded by the rook. The queen would have to move again, probably wanting to stay in contact with this pawn, maybe going here. Then pawn takes pawn. Yeah, he's got problems. So we're going to play, throw the kitchen sink at him. Okay, he defends it with a pawn. We're going to throw the kitchen sink at him. We're going to make his king safe nowhere, probably with more trades. This f6 pawn has deprived the knight of its best development square on f6, still forcing the knight to develop on g6, which is a possibility now since the dark square bishop is no longer surveying that square with my own white pawn interposing. He does have, after I play here, I want to get my rooks into the game fast. Here, now I outpost my knights. It can't be kicked by a pawn, and this move is coming, and probably put the rook back on f1, or move the queen to f3 and start taking advantage. So again, we're just going to mulch him down in a slow and steady manner. If I move the knight, what is my knight doing besides sitting there? The knight dominated by black's pawn 2 squares away. Knight dominated by black's pawn on c6, preventing it from getting to an aggressive square. But this is quite nasty. But if I do it, I do prevent the attack on the isolated pawn. And I've seen that in the chess literature with the Grandmaster. Was asked one day, why didn't he blockade the isolated pawn, pass pawn? And the Grandmaster answered, because I wanted to attack it frontally. In other words, with a rook or a queen. So what do I put a queen on it? Now what does he do? He has no way to defend it. So we just bring out the heavy artillery, line it all up on the e-file, caveman style, and rip ourselves another pawn. Yep, so there we go. I'm pawn grabby. Queens come off. He's going to just let me take pieces off. That's fine. I'm ahead. I have the option here. There's a precise way to play this. But then I would drop this. So, and there's imprecise ways to play it that are safe. We're going to just go with rapid. We're going to play rapid chess because I'm so far ahead at this point. Up the material equivalent of 2 pawns. Now up the material equivalent of a whole piece. Much better development. A king in the center. He's going to drop another pawn, and we will take that or not. Just looking at some ideas here. No longer have the perch for the knight. This knight not particularly in the game, dominated as it is by the pawn on c6, stopping it from moving into black's side of the board. I really want to get developed though here. Bishop here would prevent the knight from developing at all. So that's actually a pretty good move. Bishop here allows me to wake up my rook on the a1 square and get it into the game somewhere along my back rank. But also look, the knight has no squares to develop. He might have to bring another rook to here. I could support it. So yes, let's develop the bishop to this square. But wait, if I develop the bishop, he could try to kick it, right? Then I drop back, believe it or not, and I'm still preventing the black knight from developing. So let's do that. We're just going to annoy him. We're not going to take the free pawn yet. We suspected this might be the move. And the plan was our second rook is in, and that is the final nail in the coffin for young or not so young Mr. Jonas. The plan was to keep control of this knight. Now we'll take the pawn. I can develop my knight to a somewhat useful square. We'll take that because okay, slow down. Okay, just slow down here. Okay. Pinning the knight is probably better. My rook more active. He's guarding. I could again just continue to mulch him down, but since he's pinned, let's move my knight to e4. Yeah, that's not a bad move, but now I have this. And it's game over because he has run out of lumber. I have the kingside pawn majority. I have a nice and the extra piece. And we're going to start to bully him. 2 pawns side by side, supporting the advance of each other. This is a little tricky question here. I don't want to liquidate the pawns too much because every pawn that comes off for black is one step closer to a potential draw in most endgames. But this one, he's dead lost. He's dead. He's dead as a doornail, as they say. If I capture here, he could try some last-minute sort of run towards my queen side. It looks way too slow. Here locking him up. Here supporting it, or here taking it. It's interesting to look at this and just try to decide what is the most precise move, and I don't want or need to spend much time on it from the perspective of winning this game, since the game is already well in hand. However, there are certain endgame situations, suppose he had a knight himself on the board or a minor piece, where precise calculation would be required. The strategic importance of it. If I advance the pawn, it's of course shielded by my own knight, and it fixes this pawn as a target. However, that pawn is 3 moves away from this knight. I can't easily target that. If I take here, he takes here, I push, he's probably going to have to take. Now his king is going to have to stay on the king side, and I can just either keep my knight where it is. He can't take the time to capture the knight. So we're going to spread them out a little bit. This is the plan. I'm going to attack these 2 pawns most likely with my knight, but first we have to get down to the business. Now I could just leave this structure in place because he cannot take the knight, then he'd be out of the square of the pawn. Do you see the square of the pawn? Black is caged. Let's do it again. Black is caged into this square. Let's go this way since I can't seem to get my mouse clicks going. Black cannot leave to capture my knight. I can run over now, and I will, to take these 2 pawns. There's not a thing black can do to stop me. Let's see if he plays here anyway. Nope. Now what do you do? The cat is amongst the pigeons, and I run. And I'll take that. And I'll take that. Now I get to demonstrate how to checkmate the enemy king with a king and a queen. The easiest way in a blitz game, or if I was even playing a tournament game, would be I would just get 2 queens and do the business that way. Because it is possible, particularly under time pressure, to flub this. Now what I want to do is I want to form the L. So the L means to get on a square that's like this, an L, a knight move away from the king. And I'm going to continue to make knight moves away from the king. I got to be very careful of the stalemate. If he goes here and I were to make a knight move, it could get tricky. Okay, we're going to continue to knight move him down. And now we got him on the back rank. Another way, of course, would just simply move the... Don't want him to get material. We're knight moved him here. Okay, now we're going to bring in the king and see what happens. The easier way, of course, would be to shut off this rank, but we're going to play this L technique and see what happens. Oh, wait, I want to keep the L. What happens when he gets to the corner and I L him? How do I L him here? Here. Here. Now he only has 2 squares. No chance of a stalemate. So the L works in these situations. How am I going to mate him? Let me think. I'm going to mate him. If I put my king here while he's here, that's a stalemate. If I put my king here while he's here, that's a stalemate. So none of this is actually working, friends. I think we're going to go back to Russian schoolboy chess, and we're going to play the L here, and instead we're going to make the king pace back and forth between these two, where my king doesn't interfere, and now we checkmate him. Alright, so I don't think that was particularly smooth checkmating of the king, but I do want practice with this L technique, moving the king and the queen. So thank you very much for following the game. It was a smash. I crushed him. Some of these games have been a bit rough for me. I've been playing now since the 1500 bots. I went through the 1500s. Excuse me. I defeated the first 1600 quite handily, and then had 2 bad games, very horrible games, against the second 1600 bot. Finally beat it in the 3rd game, and now I've continued to ripping through the 1700 bots. I really don't expect much resistance until we get to the, I don't know, 1900 style bots. I say that knock on wood because the 18 bots are going to come up, just one more 1700 to go. Alright, so thank you for following. Have a great day. Ta-ta.